Well, so you've touched on kind of AI and safety a couple times in the last few minutes, and you also kind of operate in a world that I think is considered a gray area to a lot of AI researchers, right? To, defense or military applications. I'm curious what you think about generally about especially natural language models and safety, and what should be done, how worried you think people should be about misuse of these models, and like what role you think you should play as sort of like a leading company in the space.
Well, I think first and foremost, if we want to be a global superpower as America, you have to have defense, you have to have intelligence. You may not want to have them, but then you don't get to be the global superpower. So that's the first thing to kind of just accept is that defense and intelligence are part and parcel of being a global superpower. It's also part and parcel of defending liberal Western democracy. And there are plenty of other organizations and governments in the world that don't want that to exist. So we need that. As you come back from that, the second thing you say, well, we want it, but we want it to be good, right? And so you say, well, if I want it to be good, well, we need to bring artificial intelligence and the latest technologies that we're developing to bear on that problem space. It's sort of a strange philosophical ground to say, well, we need to have defense, but it shouldn't be good, right? It's just a strange position. Now, as you go through that, you say, well, yeah, there are also ethical concerns and moral concerns. There are very, very few organizations in the world that think more deeply about the ethical and moral implications of war than defense and intelligence. They live and breathe this stuff. And we can kind of sit here and arm back quarterback from the valley. But the reality is this is something that has been thought very, very deeply about and has a lot of care. And the kind of rules of engagement are very, very well defined and very, very well thought through and have been shaped and kind of constructed over many, many years. Now, a lot of them haven't imagined what AI does in that, but there's also been a huge amount of work, going back for me over the last decade with defense, with intelligence, talking about these exact scenarios of what it means to have artificial intelligence engaging in this kind of process. So for me here, bringing this technology to bear in defense and intelligence is something that I think is the right thing to do. And it's a very, very important mission for myself and for our company. As we do that, we also realize we've got a responsibility that it matters. If we're generating models that are classifying things that are unfolding in the world and saying, look, we identified an event. And if you misclassify that intelligence is now percolating up a chain, which is going to have consequences, right? So there are very real consequences when you talk about the precision of the models that you're working with. There are very real consequences when you talk about what the data has been trained on, what the susceptibility of the models that you've got are to outside adversarial attacks. So all of this becomes something that you need to kind of work with and deal with. I think the ethical, components of this woven into the decisions that we make, and it's something that's also moving, I think, pretty quickly. And there's one thing you learn in science and technology is that science and technology moves a whole lot faster than the philosophical and ideological kind of foundations on which you can kind of make decisions on top of. And so you are by nature going to be in gray zones. And this is something you've got to be kind of open to and say, look, we're going to navigate where perhaps no one's ever thought about this before, and there isn't kind of a strong kind of rule that you can fall back to and say, hey, this is the answer, and this is what you're supposed to do in the situation, because the situation's never existed before. So, it's something that we spend a lot of time, and with both ourselves and also our advisors, spending time each and every week going through this stuff, making decisions and trying to kind of navigate the best path that we can through this. But I think it would be a lie to say that this is really easy and there's this clear black and white kind of distinctions, because we're dealing with stuff that simply didn't exist in the world before, but we're also dealing on the geopolitical scale with stuff that simply didn't exist in the world before.
And do you think, like, at this moment in time, August 2020, do you think that the that for governments, natural language processing, like machine learning, is an important part of their defense capability?
Yeah, I think there's three places where it comes through. The first is on the intelligence side. There's too much information coming in, and simply put, if you don't have machines playing some role in helping you navigate that information, you're going to have information that no one ever sees. And if you don't see information, you can't bring it to bear on decisions that you're making. So step one, the volume of information requires a natural language toolkit to actually help navigate. The second thing here is that the complexity of the world that we're in means that, drawing inferences between something that's happening in Russia and something that's happening in, East Africa is very, very difficult for an individual that has to specialize in, I'm an East African specialist or I'm a Russian specialist. Machines don't have that limitation, right? They can look further, they can look wider, they can draw inference across larger set of data points because they're not fundamentally constrained by the bandwidth of information they can consume. So I think as we move to a more complex world, it's essential to have machines that can make connections across domains that humans aren't necessarily looking at. The third thing is, and this is sort of, I think, become increasingly important, is that more and more information is being generated by machines, and that's being used to manipulate. And if you've got humans that are trying to filter through the output of propaganda from China that's being machine generated, you've brought a knife to a gunfight. You're going to lose that. And so as we look at things like, the operations out of Pacific Command, there's a huge volume of information now that China's got its head around disinformation and manipulation. You can't navigate this as a set of humans. It's just not possible. And if you try and do that, you're going to lose. So I think the disinformation landscape has necessitated a set of machines that need to come into this.
Thanks for watching this clip. You can see the full episode on our YouTube channel. And you can join our friendly Slack community with over 4,000 ML engineers to participate in paper reading groups, AMAs, and other fun events.